So what we'll do, I think we have about 17 people here today so far, and I think it will probably keep adding a bit. What we might do in terms of introductions is as we get going and you're making comments for the first time, it'd be great if you would just share who you are and what program you're representing. That might be a little bit more efficient. What we'll do is just give you a brief overview and move into some questions that we want to pose to the group to start that conversation today. Um, what we'll tell you that we've been doing so far is for this year, we're deciding to continue to focus on as a SIGME on recruiting and marketing of our programs with the idea of how do we populate our programs with that trajectory of populating the field in terms of people working in educational measurement. Our last webinar did focus on this topic as well from a different angle. And we know that graduate student recruitment remains a problem for many programs throughout the US and abroad. So we want to continue to focus on that. We've taken a few steps recently in this work. We've actually been working with NCME on this issue, looking at different angles of this, and have sent some information to the board around this. With that, we said we would continue to gather some information and bring that back to the board to see how they could help us in terms of marketing programs as well. And so they're very open to, at this point in time, recognizing the issue that we're facing. So that'll happen hopefully in the spring when we submit that proposal. What we're also doing based on the conversation today is we'll be sending out a survey to all the programs that NCME has information on, asking some questions about recruiting, barriers to recruiting, and looking at new ways of recruiting and target audiences that we want to focus on for that. So that'll happen. We've also submitted an NCME proposal for this spring conference around these topics where we would share that information from programs and continue that conversation at that point in time. So those are the next steps educators in measurement are taking to try to move this area forward for recruiting from programs. I'll just pause for a second and ask Justin and Corinne if I missed anything important that we're working on right now.
I think that captured it well. I noticed that Jay Lee put in the chat a question for later about is NCME open to financially supporting recruitment? And I think that just pings, I just summarized real quick based on what Brian said. It was actually through a webinar of this SIGME in last spring, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian and Justin, where it was suggested that we work with the board, get the board on board to see what they would do to support. So when we talked to the board, they were excited. They liked the feedback from the last webinar, but they do need more of a formal proposal. And so that's where this is leaning, as Brian was mentioning, but that proposal would, be asking them to invest in marketing for our field in some way. And so I hope that helps to answer that.
Yeah, I think what I would add, I think, Corinne, and this would be ideas that we'll throw out for discussion here. Some of those ideas that were floated was, does NCME give a break for students joining NCME for the first year or first 2 years as their students, just to get people connected to the organization in a faster way without the burdensome of fees. So those types of ideas we'd love to hear about and work into the proposal. So that would be great. So we only have 2 slides and then we'll stop sharing our screen. For today's conversation, what we're looking at is really focusing on a few questions, and the conversation can go in different directions from those questions. I'm also going to put those questions in the chat right now, so they're also there, so we don't forget those. Again, we can go in any order, but the idea and the goal here is to inform our next steps in terms of bringing a proposal to NCME board to help us with this and gathering information from you. So with those questions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you have those in the chat, and we'll open it up for conversation with everyone. Okay. Sorry, I'm playing with my screen, trying to find the right buttons. So with the first question, we'd like to just hear from people of who are the primary targets in your recruiting to your programs. That was our first kind of question to get us going. No one has any primary targets of who they're recruiting. That's fine.
Well, I do. I was just trying to be
Okay,
nice
Jade.
and let other
Thank you,
people talk
Jade.
first.
That's fine. Go for it.
I always go for it. I was trying to play the back end. Good afternoon / good morning, everyone. I definitely think that I don't represent a graduate program in measurement specifically, but I think it makes sense to try to start thinking about recruiting from the institution wherever the grad program is currently living. So what type of pipeline with the undergraduate students that may be interested in quantitative psychology or, basically anything other than clinical psychology, computer science, thinking about AI in our field. There's just all kinds of pathways that could, I think, be explored within a particular university setting, and not sure if there are folks on the call, given that I don't represent that, and that's just my theory, if anyone has had successes or even could highlight and elevate some challenges that may exist between encouraging undergraduate students at your institution to consider the graduate program that you represent. So I'll pause there. That's just one thought in terms of the who.
No, that's a great thought, Jaden. I don't know. I guess it'd be interesting to hear from people how many people do try to recruit undergraduates from their own institutions. We've had some success with that here.
Jade, I've done that. Can you hear me, Jade? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Dina Pastor and I used to go into, sorry, I'm Sarah Finney. I'm at James Madison University. And we had a pretty good relationship with our undergraduate psychology department. And we would go into a course that was called Careers in Psychology. And every week they'd have someone come in like to talk about like IO psychology or clinical psychology or whatever. And Dina and I would go in and talk about quant. And we would often give an example of, let's say you want to evaluate a program to decrease test anxiety in the local high school. And we kind of would work through all the different skills you had to have in methodology, statistics, measurement, program evaluation. And then we brought up like the Division 5 in psychology, because they had gone through all those divisions. And we showed them many different programs in the field. Clearly, we wanted them to come to our program, and we had good relations with those faculty members. So I would sit on like honors theses and things like that to make those connections. I would say we recruited, I don't know, maybe 12 to 20 students that way through our master's and PhD program. And I've done Psych-Chi talks and Psych Club talks as well at our institution. I have not done College of Ed.
So I was going to mention when you were doing that, I was thinking my daughter is enrolled in the Psych-Chi club at her university, and then that was a way that they would do that. So I mean, it might be possible that we could, as going as NCME, we could make connections there with the national Psych-Chi, which would then push things out to make resources available to the chapters. I was going to say that one of the things that I think I have a problem with is that I don't think a lot of undergraduates are even aware that we exist, and that measurement and statistics and psychometrics are a career.
Yeah, Russell, I think that's a great point, and I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I'll just throw out some thoughts and see how people react to that. If you look at other disciplines, so if you think about the National Academy of Sciences, they have essentially science fairs for undergraduate students, and they go and present their work as undergraduate students and high school students at some of these national conventions. And my guess is psychometrics measurement has very rarely, if ever, been represented in those. I work with local high school students going to some of these, presenting the work. Some of the work's outstanding in engineering and health and so forth, but I never see anything dealing with measurement or psychometrics. And so, Russell, I think you're right. We're just kind of an unknown entity that does, I would say, complex, meaningful work, but we're not represented at those types of organizations where high school and undergraduate students would be exposed to this. So I think the system of that is important.
I'm going to correct you in one way, and it's been a while since I've been there, but I definitely saw projects where students were in psychology and making up questionnaires and going out and giving them to people, but they were not getting any psychometric guidance about what they were doing there.
Okay.
So they really had no idea of what they needed to be asking about reliability and validity and how to really think about their instrument.
Okay, well, that's great you've seen that. But yeah, not being exposed to mentors early on probably hurts us in a way of getting people into our programs. But I think that touches on a little bit of our second question, major barriers that we experience. I think one is exposure to the field. And Andre, thank you for your note in the chat, even starting with high school programs. How do we get exposure at that level so people can start thinking about it at the undergraduate level? So what other major barriers do people see in terms of their recruiting to their programs?
Hi, Brian. Brian Leventhal, James Madison University as well. I think kind of going along with the themes that have already come up, one of the best recruiting tools we have is our personnel, and that is a huge barrier because that's time and resources. It takes a lot of time to make those personal connections, but those are also what work best. So that's been a struggle.
I'll chime in time as well. University of Florida, Corinne. The time that it takes, and I feel like we're doing the same things over and over. Maybe that's typical, but trying to show people what our program is, what they would do in our program, and what they would do post graduation. To Jade's point in the comment, it's like it's a message that's never fully delivered well, to the point where I feel like they truly understand. And so we spend our time, it's like it doesn't feel like we can get to larger initiatives. We're just trying to explain who we are and show that we're here.
Russell, I saw you put a oh, there it is. Okay, so there's something on a recruiting talk online. Okay, thanks for sharing that. With the time and resources for that being a barrier, how have people tried to overcome that? Or is it just, it remains a barrier and it's pretty hard to overcome? I'm just curious.
There's two things that I've thought about doing, but have not had the time. And one is to try and go around to several different local colleges. I mean, I took the advantage of the fact that my daughter was doing an undergrad psych program at Flagler to go visit her class and talk, basically give this recruiting talk plus some talk about some of the research that I was currently doing and some evidence-centered design stuff. I'm also thinking, because I'm right next door to FAMU, which is a historically Black college, right? And so that's a great place to recruit more minority students. So I should go and find the right course to go over there and visit and say, hey, we got this great program, this is a great field for you to get into. We'd love to see love to see a wide range of people, right? Diversity is of our psychometricians is one of the things that we value. And oh, by the way, we got to, you don't even have to move out to Tallahassee to do it. But I mean, that's near the other thing that I've been thinking about is trying to make a number of, I'm thinking of them as audio, but video would work too, just short little clips, talking briefly about issues in measurement at a lay audience level, like the importance of validity and and why you needed to pretest, and what is a construct anyway, and what is reliability, and why is it important, things of that nature that would help people think about both how to consume educational statistics that they're seeing, and also get them interested in the fact that, hey, there's some really interesting deep problems here if you want to participate.
Brian, this is Chad Buckendahl. Like Jade, I'm not actually with a program, but Dr. Ullman said something that resonated with me in terms of not having to move out of Tallahassee. There's a lot of really good programs represented on the call today, and we've had some success recruiting staff members out of departments of education who are looking to get master's or doctorate degrees in measurement, and yet they're they're in the workforce, they have families, they're not going to relocate to do that. And so the limitations of options for virtual programs, or at least hybrid programs. So we've had a couple of our staff go through the UIC program in Chicago, and they've gotten really good training, and one of them wants to go on and get her doctorate. And frankly, I would love for her to have been able to go to one of the programs represented on the call today. And no offense to the program she's enrolled in, but it's not one of the top programs, but that's where she lives. And so she's not going to move her family to do it. So I think that's one of the barriers, at least what we've found for folks, is just like availability, given kind of the limitations of some of the great programs.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. That's helpful. I saw a hand go. Yeah, go ahead.
So kind of related to that, Chad, Rhonda Turner at Arkansas. We are similar to some of you, where we're within a couple of hours of a number of institutions that might have master's programs but not doctoral programs. And I sometimes have been successful, but not always successful, at trying to develop relationships with other faculty in math and psychology and those areas that don't have their own doctoral program. And then these students, realistically, like some of them can go full time and still keep their job and drive 2 hours, up to 3. I get some students that will drive up to 3. And still come take our courses, 1 or 2 nights a week. And so that we've had some luck with that in terms of the non-full-time student adding to the program. But of course, full-time students are ideal. That's just another supplement that we have with recruiting.
I'm Jade Lee. I am founder and CEO of the JC Research Group and assistant research professor at University of Kansas. And although I don't represent a graduate program directly, I've been working with a program called the SOAR program that I developed in consultation with Scott Marion from the Center for Assessment, as well as some folks at KU. And we really had an explicit focus on trying to recruit from historically Black colleges and universities to start, and eventually wanting to expand to Hispanic serving institutions, as well as thinking about tribal colleges and universities. And to Brian's point in the chat, in terms of recruiting faculty, not so much thinking about students, but thinking about faculty at other institutions, especially in undergraduate psych programs, let's say, for example, or math majors, math department chairs, computer science department chairs, and some of the challenges specifically in thinking about the goal of diversifying the field, but thinking about minority serving institutions as a vehicle in which to try to attempt to do that, is that the capacity of faculty who are looking at MSIs is extremely limited. And so even in the hopes of trying to get high quality psych students or math majors or computer science students, and reaching out to faculty and saying, hey, paid summer internship for your students, $6,000, which is a lot of money for undergraduates. And we were really looking to get rising freshmen and rising sophomores, which is typically not so much where internships target at the undergraduate level, but the capacity issue in terms of faculty who are just have many jobs beyond the one that they're actually getting paid to do. And so that's been a big challenge in terms of diversifying the field from an ethnic/racial perspective, and really trying to partner with minority serving institutions in order to do that. That's been a huge challenge. I just wanted to sort of elevate that, and curious about other people's perspectives on ways to either navigate around that, or ways that maybe you've partnered with MSIs in order to think about sort of the pipeline from undergrad to grad program, specifically in measurement.
Thank you, Jade. Chad, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, but I'm happy to pause if anyone wants to respond to that last inquiry that Jade threw out there.
But I always want to hear what you have to say, Chad, so go right ahead.
All right. Yeah, I had some thoughts that are connecting to multiple people's comments, Russell and Jade's, about diversifying the student profile, and Chad's with regard to folks that are in the workforce. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm Chad Gotch at Washington State University, down the hall from Brian French right now. And then also just connecting to Andre's comment in the chat, and I wonder, when we think about barriers, how much we're thinking about maybe self-imposed barriers. And we talk about like reaching out to, say, historically Black universities or other undergrad programs, and bringing people into what we do. But I wonder if we can think about a potential barrier is maybe sometimes a lack of responsiveness to what those individuals would bring to our work. So rather than saying, hey, you can come do our stuff, can we be flexible and think differently about our work, so that it is a home for people who maybe are not the traditional measurement students, or haven't been the traditional measurement students. So just maybe a different way of thinking about a barrier, perhaps, other than the more external kind of time and money and resources and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Chad. The one thought I was having hearing different people talk also is, I think Justin and Corinne, we talked about this in some of our meetings, is how do we have, as a unit, like a whole unit of the measurement field, work together to try to populate programs. And I think some of those comments have come up in the chats around people being place bound, needing to go to a certain program in their area, and maybe connecting with the faculty in a different program or a different area, and then them connecting them back to another program. So it might not be a benefit to your own program, but it's a benefit to the field of helping find a place for that student you've had a contact with. So I don't know how much we've focused on that as a field in terms of thinking kind of outside our own institution and making sure we have really good students in our own institution. But how do we work together as a whole field to try to make sure we're finding those right students and then finding them homes at one of our neighboring institutions? So I'm trying to think about what that looks like, or how do programs really work together to make sure we're all on the same page of getting people into our programs.
Well, I can say I meet with a lot of students, undergrads and master's level students who want to go on PhD programs. And when I meet with them, I give them a whole list of programs that I say, if I were going to go to school right now, here was my track, but if I were to go to school right now, these are the programs I would go to do these kinds of jobs. And while I'd love to have you come to our program, there's only so many slots and so many people taking students. And so I think you should look at these other places. And fortunately, I know I have colleagues at various places that do a similar thing and send students to JMU because they don't have enough slots. And they're like, you should really check out so-and-so, at JMU. Then I also want to say one strategy I've used is this doesn't help with the undergrad to graduate program, But instead, there's a lot of graduate master's level students I teach that think they want to go into clinical or think they want to go into IO. And then after they complete their master's degree in that area, they decide, I really kind of like my stat measurement classes better. And I kind of try to recruit them right as soon as I get a little inkling that they might be interested. Even if it's just, well, why don't you apply to like some quant programs, measurement programs, in addition to your IO program or your clinical program? Because then when they get waitlisted on those other programs or don't get in the first time, we often get those students. We've gotten a number of students that way because they've generated interest. Like Russell was saying, they didn't know they were interested in stat measurement until they took the courses as part of their clinical masters or their clinical IO or whatever it might be. So I've, so to speak, poached a bunch of students that way from other programs. It's worked very well.
That does open up to that question about what are successful strategies. So thanks for sharing that, Sarah. That's great. Are there other successful strategies people have used along that same line?
So I will share that, and thank you, Sarah. I like the idea of us supporting each other more. And I think that's probably one of the first things I'll add in to what we do is to also shine where else you can do that. One thing that we've done, and I'm saying this because I think maybe others have a similar thing. When I first got to UF, our only undergrads in College of Ed were pre-service teachers, but our college has added an education sciences bachelor's, which is happening at other colleges of ed. I don't know if y'all are seeing that too. So they're already not intending to be teachers, and they're not in psychology. And so we wrapped in a specialization in educational psychology and research methods. Notice we're trying to ping ourselves to ed psych and to ed sciences. Like we're here, but we know that you aren't going to come straight to us. That's a lot of work to get the 1 or 2 students we've gotten a year, but we have gotten 1 or 2. And meanwhile, our graduate students are getting teaching experience because they're TAing those classes. So that makes it worth the work as well. And I think at a minimum, my next talk to all of those undergrads will be to show them more of the programs, not just our program here at UF. Yeah.
I'm curious for, oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Trent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Trent Haynes. I'm from the graduate program in psychometrics at Morgan State University. And we don't really have a lot of recruitment strategy overall. Our program has been very, very small for a long time. And we're just now trying to push and get a much larger student body. Part of our work is restructuring our master's program to make it a little faster to complete, and then hopefully recruiting students from that into our doc program. One thing that has led to a lot of our students, though, in the doc program is that they are kind of, Corinne, what you were saying is, they don't come to us directly, and they often come to us after several years working just in whatever profession they've been, they've chosen to do. So it's sort of like, maybe earlier mid-career kind of a shift. And one of the things I've been thinking about is, there are a lot of folks in our school system who have to do things with assessments, right? And so I think that could be a good target for folks who want to shift careers or beef up their credentials or become directors of assessment, those kinds of things.
I wonder if we think about the original sort of introduction, Brian, that you offered about a potential proposal that Corinne, you also talked about in terms of NCME and how the SIGME could get some tangible supports from NCME board. What if there's like some version of a virtual speaker series where you have different folks? I think about all the different demographic characteristics, if you can muster that up, and what they're doing with their XYZ degree, if we still feel like their job is in the field of, educational assessment / measurement. So especially some of the folks who are recent graduates, like within the last 5 years, who might be working in the Office of Institutional Research at a higher education institution, right? Utilizing their skill set in some, ed psych with a focus on measurement or even an evaluation program. Folks who might be working for state departments of ed, folks that might be working within their the accountability department of their district, their school district. So I just think that maybe there's some ways in which to support like a virtual speaker series on what you could do with a degree in this area that kind of spans the gamut, because there's so many jobs, there's so many different types of jobs you can have with the training you're getting in a measurement program. And I think that that is lost. And to me, thinking about what Russell shared, that link, if that's something that could be captured in video and then, just sort of a part of the NCME library, it could help with recruitment in a massive way. A lot of young folks that I know and mentor talk about wanting to make an impact in whatever career they choose. And there's just a great opportunity for making an impact in this field. And I think sometimes the how might get lost. So if you don't go into academia and if you don't go into working for a testing company, what else could you do? There's a whole heck of a lot. So I wonder in terms of like an honorarium for the folks who would be offering their time, because I'm kind of getting tired of us asking people to be a part of webinars and not valuing their expertise and the time that it takes for them to prepare something valuable. So if we were able to ask the board for some supports around that, I think that could potentially be a pathway towards getting some financial and monetary support.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. That's great. It also makes me think about the idea of not just the speaker series, but I'm thinking and picturing in my mind AERA's website, and they have little short videos of researchers that just come out. I think it'd be great to even think about what does it mean to have little short videos of some of the people in our field talking about the work they do. So not necessarily one research study or a new finding, but just about the jobs they do and what they're excited about and the impact. I like how you phrase that, the influence and impact they have on the fields they're working in. That would be a whole different kind of marketing of what we're doing, not from a research point of view, but really what does it mean to do the work we do. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for that.
Just so others know as well, what was suggested, and then the group kind of convened on it in the spring webinar or discussion, was that we actually try to propose to NCME to hire a marketing company of some sort. We do have to look around and say, we don't know how to market. That's not what we're doing. But I like also the more concrete ideas of things that we do see that we could do and help shine, because I think the marketers are going to have just a harder time understanding what we do, so.
Yes, but there's some skills that they'll bring to the table, like editing videos to make them look high quality as opposed to, cheap captures from a Zoom that, would be very valuable.
Yeah, we certainly aren't speaking for the board in any way, but one of our goals of doing this, using this to create a survey, we're going to survey program, talk to grad students similarly in the spring. We're hoping that could be a springboard of some data for some marketing specialists, if the board chooses to go that route, because I think they also can disseminate it to more targeted audiences better. That's their job. I like the chapter, Sarah. We saw that when we were looking through all these earlier.
But yeah, it's kind of geared towards psych, because that's who put out the book. But I could see something that has more of an education focus being created. It's short, it's easy to pass around.
That's kind of gotten down the pathway a little bit of what do we see NCME doing in terms of helping us. So I think helping with some of the marketing, helping us with the funding of things would be great. Are there other ideas at that kind of larger level of the organization that you would want to propose as ideas for how they could help?
Brian, this is Chad again. Going back to what I mentioned about the workforce. I think it may not be well known within the NCME community how diverse the sectors in which practitioners who get skill sets from these programs, what that looks like. And we work with folks, whether it's in financial services, technology, healthcare, like all these different areas. Many of them have data science or data analyst people who they actually want to get some psychometric training, and they don't necessarily know where to go.
Mhm.
And so NCME helping to, I don't know, illustrate market, like Corinne said, like all the places you can go, along with, I don't know if it's like a 1-page talking point sheet or something that would be easy, because we do get requests from clients saying, hey, this is cool stuff. Where could we go to learn more? And
Mhm.
honestly, I've been kind of pointing a lot of people towards UIC because of the online program. Russell, I really appreciate you saying that you guys have your master's online now, so we can include that as part of that list. And same thing, like we point to every one of the programs of folks on this call. And then if folks happen to be in your city, great, they look at it. But if they don't, it's if they have to be living in wherever they're having to live for their job, it's more difficult. But that diversity, I think people sometimes when they think education, they do think like that K-12 space somewhat narrowly, and not that education is this really breadth of continuum that goes from really early childhood all the way through end of your career.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. No, thanks. I see a comment in the chat about, does NCME have a strategic plan for recruitment, both short and long term? Justin, Corinne, I don't think they do. I do see Deb Harris is here, also our liaison to the board, so she might know if we don't. We have not heard that that I can recall, or seen any document around that from NCME. That would certainly be something to talk about and see what that would look like and help develop that.
I think the one thing I can add is that Brian and Justin help me here. The board is working heavily this year on recruiting to NCME.
Right.
And so they saw this nice alignment that we're looking at this broader. We also just want to get people that are into the field and then to NCME, and seeing that as, our initiative would help them have more people at NCME, because we have to get them in the field first, or vice versa. So I think that's where we align a little. And I do think they're trying to be strategic on that, but it is the recruitment to NCME. So somehow we have to include that in our proposal to them, and we're working on that.
That's a totally related but different angle. And I'm thinking to myself, I co-chair the NCME Classroom Assessment Committee with Dustin Van Orman. And our committee has had some really great successes with recruiting members over the last several years, members to NCME, and then members of our Classroom Assessment Committee who never would have seen themselves as assessment people. And they're doing assessment work, especially classroom assessment work, but maybe they're doing it in the bilingual education subdiscipline, or maybe they're doing it within mathematics education specifically. And so there's been we put a proposal to the board in terms of offering honorariums to the webinar speakers that we just had for our equity and assessment for learning series in September and October. But something that came up from the discussions with our board liaison, Zach Warner, was thinking about, like, for the people who presented in our webinar series, they're not members of NCME, but why not offer them a free complimentary year of membership to NCME? They participated in our webinar. They're clearly interested in assessment, and their work overlaps with assessment. But then that 1 year complimentary, whenever it's up, maybe they see the value add and they want to stay. So to me, that's an angle that's not so much from a student perspective, but it's still thinking about professionals who have work and do work that overlap with measurement and assessment, but they don't consider themselves to be assessment folk enough to even join an assessment organization. So that's just something I wanted to share, because we're recognizing that there's a lot of folks out there that are doing work that overlaps with the mission and vision of NCME, but would never think to join because they don't see maybe the value add. And even thinking about SIGMEs, maybe SIGMEs need to be open to not just members. We talked about this even when it first came up, like maybe there needs to be like, you can join the SIGME if you're not a member, it's a different rate, but then that's how you come into NCME. So that's something that I think when Steve Cerisi first proposed SIGMEs, that was something that was like discussed at that point, but I think we might need to revisit that, because this SIGME specifically, educators of anything having to do with data science, or, there's just so many overlaps where you could get folks interested in the NCME through the SIGMEs. Just ideas I'm throwing out there.
Thank you, Jade. And Di, I saw your hand go up as Jade was talking, so probably a related point.
Yes, thanks to that, it reminds me of the SIGMEs, because I co-chairing the large scale assessment SIGME. In our SIGME, we have a pretty large group of subscribers from overseas, from Europe, from Asia, on IEA related those. They have a huge base doing large scale assessments, measurement, and every year, I think ARA and CME meetings, we have a lot of participants from overseas. So I wonder whether there's a strategy that we have any recruitment plans or strategies reaching out to overseas, so Europe, Asia, and because we do see there's a large community of international scholars here, international students, and we have a lot of participation every year. They're traveling from all the world to come to NCME. So that might be something we can think of, reaching out outside United States. Just some of my thoughts here. But I am Shanda from Washington State University. My office standing between Chad's office and Brian's office.
Thanks for being here, Di. Yeah, thanks for that. That's great. And I did see on recruitment, Deb Harris did say NCME is working on and interested in both recruitment to NCME and to the field. So just want to make sure that was, if you missed that in the chat. And Chad, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Jade, I'm curious with those folks that you've been able to bring in through the classroom assessment focus. Do you know, is it folks who were doing measurement assessment kinds of things and just didn't know that they, that like NCME existed, or they weren't thinking of their work as measurement? Or kind of going back to what I was suggesting earlier, has the classroom assessment SIGME kind of, I guess, reached out to folks who maybe are doing more with like assessment use or implications, or like the more human side of measurement and assessment?
I think it's more the former than the latter, but I do think there's a combo of both. And so, for example, there might be someone who's rolling off of the committee, and they are heavily involved in the overlaps of assessment and English language learning. And they know a colleague or have a colleague that's doing important work in that area, as the overlaps, especially with assessment. And so they recommend, maybe you want to investigate, seeing if that person might be interested in joining the committee. They're not NCME members, they're interested, they join the committee, and thereby they join NCME. So that's happened like at least 4 or 5 times. But then also, I think to myself, NCME is a professional organization. You have to see yourself as you have to identify with the primary purpose of the organization. And so given that we all know measurement and assessment doesn't happen without content, right? And so if I'm interested in arts education, but I care a lot about how we assess and how we measure high quality arts education, I could be heavily investigating that just through arts education subdiscipline. I could be a part of arts education professional associations. Why would I need to join NCME? So then it's like, well, it's not just like they did one paper or one study, like their research area could specifically be about assessment. I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm thinking about Heidi right now, with like for years she was doing work with arts educators, right? But with the assessment, being more primary. And so how many other researchers and practitioners are out there that just don't identify as assessment professionals or people who do assessment work where they would see value from joining an organization like NCME? So I think it's a little bit of both. Did I answer your question, Chad? That was a good question. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking, Sarah, when we saw each other last month, I'm thinking about what you shared in terms of like student affairs professionals and how like you have really been involved in attending conferences and doing work in that area. And there are folks who, you know, are doing some really important work in that field, but are they members of NCME? Do they see themselves as assessment professionals in any kind of way? That marketing piece that y'all mentioned earlier, there's a part about the identity that we kind of have to address as well.
No, you're right, Jade. Yeah, I go to a lot of higher ed assessment conferences, whether it's assessing for like major academic degree programs, general education, or student affairs. And those folks all have measurement assessment training, but they don't go to AER. Well, some go to AERA, they go to a specific SIG in AERA, but they do not go to NCME or APA or Psychometric Society or any of that. I see them at ACPA, NASPA, Assessment Institute, SHIA, those kind of conferences.
Another question I'll throw out is, as we've talked about looking across programs, and I think NCME has a list of 53, 54 programs that is somewhat updated, not completely updated on the website. As you guys think about information you'd want to know, what are some key things you'd want to know across all programs? That I think we know some things about different programs, but there are some themes or practices about recruitment or just what the programs look like that you would want to or you'd be interested in understanding to help the field move forward? And I'm asking this for help with our survey design. What are things we want to know about?
Well, one thing I always want to know is how many students are people looking to get? Because I'm involved in a lot of these conversations about recruiting and attracting students to the field. But then when you talk to people at each program, they have spots for 3 students or 2 students. And I think we have to have a frank conversation about that too. So especially if it's, some people who want to go full time and have full funding.
Yeah, I'm guessing that varies quite a bit within and between programs, depending on funding year to year. Some programs probably have better sources of funding than others. And I know that's always a conversation that comes up with how do we, like smaller programs, how do you compete with bigger programs who just have sustainable funding for year after year after year, where others are more dependent on other types of funding that aren't as sustainable, certainly.
This is Trent again.
Yeah.
Having enough slots, there's a balance. You have enough slots, and we pay more attention to that with our doc program than our masters. You have to have enough faculty to mentor the students, and you have to have enough students to fit within the faculty's interests, and there's sort of all that matching stuff that happens. And for us, recruiting was really, for a while, I was the only faculty member teaching full-time in our program. And so it was really hard for me to say, hey, I'm fantastic, but I'm not for everybody, right? And I say fantastic, I say that kind of jokingly, but also seriously. Now we have relatively speaking, a much larger faculty. There are 2 of us teaching full-time in our program, and then we have some others who supplement that. But to have a good mentor, you also can't have a mentor with multiple students. We mentor, I think I have maybe 10 students on my list now. It's a lot. Other departments on our campus have, and that's everybody for me, but other departments have sometimes 15 and 20 dissertations plus additional. So it's like, it's a balance there, but I think for me, that's a big challenge. And then when you get new faculty, you also have to allow them to build their what's the right term? Group of students, I suppose. You don't want them to take on a bunch the first year, maybe one or two, and then another one, and so you're building and then rotating people in and out. As they graduate, you bring more in and so forth. So anyway, it's one of the sort of getting all of that to sync is one of the big challenges, I think.
Thanks, Trent.
Oh, Brian, do you know who maintains the list on NCME? Because our program is not listed.
This last year, I do not know that, but I can find out. I can't recall. I think I'm picturing a name and I cannot picture whose name was on there that updated it last. I don't know if they're in charge of this all the time. But we can find out for sure and get you added, I'm sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
I appreciate it.
Trent, if you send me that information, I'd be glad to pass that on to NCME to get that added.
That works. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And Rana had a nice comment of, maybe that list should be on the website where it can be updated a lot and it's out there. That could be nice. It does feel like a secret list. I don't think it's intended to be.
Yeah, you have to go through a few layers to find it if you know what you're looking for to get to it. Yeah.
And to be fair, I don't think a lot of students if they don't know enough about the programs, they don't know to go to NCME to look. So it's more of faculty that use that, I think, or at least some of us do. And we'll say, here's all the programs, and show it to our students, but it could be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And Di just posted the link in there so you can see that. Yeah, thanks, Di. Are there comments or thoughts for today? We covered the questions we had that we want to hear about. It's been great conversation.
I wish there was a way, and I don't know about the rest of you, if you have any ideas. I tend to just send emails out to my colleagues, that I know. And I'm like, do you have students? Do you have, people who are graduating and here's, openings we have and that kind of thing. And I don't know, and occasionally we advertise on AERA website and some of the APA, but I don't know. It'd be nice for us to have a networking system, but I don't know how that even works other than us just emailing each other. I don't know.
Yeah, that goes back to one of our comments at the beginning of how do we work together to get, and I think we've heard some of this, like we push people to programs or we make them aware of this, but how do we do that at a larger, like systematic way is something to think about. I don't have an immediate answer for that one, but certainly worth trying to figure out. I know moving forward, we'll have another webinar. And Justin, do you know what that date is? You're leading that one. I can't remember the date. I don't remember the date. We'll have another one focused on this. Oh, go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
It'll be like early spring.
Okay. Yeah.
So probably like February. I think that's what we were talking about, February, March. Yeah.
Okay. That seems to ring a bell. Thank you. So we'll again focus on another aspect of this. We will be developing some type of survey to go out to programs. You'll see that. Please respond or get your program coordinators or colleagues to respond to this. That information will be helpful for us, including what we've talked about today, to work into a proposal for NCME for some of these ideas. As we develop that, we might reach out to some people on this call today, given your comments, to see if you have feedback on this before we take it to the board. That would be helpful also as a sounding board to make sure we're not missing something. And hopefully see what NCME will respond with in terms of helping us in the field move this forward. So I want to thank everyone today for being here. I know it's an hour of your time. We appreciate that. I know Jade said it's great to be paid for this. We can't pay you to be here, but we appreciate your comments sincerely and appreciate the insights you give us as we move forward. So thank you for that. Justin, Corinne, anything else to add before we close out today?
No, thank you. I would say the next survey and webinar is for the grad students rather than the program to understand how they found the field, what their peers think about the fields. So please let your grad students know to come and talk to us like you did today and to respond to our survey when we send it out. We figured those were the two arms we want
Yeah,
some people from.
I think the graduate student community is going to be really, really important for this.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a happy holiday next weekend or next week.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, we good?
So I'll stop recording.